Battle Creek Sanitarium records indicate that Mr. Canright was released from the institution early in June. His niece informed me that he was taken by ambulance to the home of his daughter Genevieve, in Hillsdale, Michigan. She was a Christian Scientist and did not favor the attendance of physicians or nurses. Therefore Mr. Canright could not always have enjoyed the care that one of his age and in his condition should have had. For 3 years Canright lived on. His relatives report that he was confined to a wheelchair. He recovered sufficiently so that he could, at times, return to his home in Grand Rapids. With help of an ex-Seventh-day Adventist minister he was able to bring the work on his book Life of Mrs. E.G. White to completion. His manuscript was submitted to the Standard Publishing Company, and the records of that organization showed that on July 15, 1918, D. M. Canright signed a contract for its publication. It was published July 1919. On May 12, 1919, Dudley M. Canright died of a paralytic stroke at Hillsdale, Michigan, in the home of his daughter Genevieve, to which he had come the preceding December. Page 166. There are conflicting accounts concerning the funeral services held for Mr. Canright. His niece, Mrs. Marie Wright, 9 years after his death, told me that no funeral service was held and that there was only a committal at the cemetery conducted by a Christian Science reader, Mr. J.C. MacDonald. She further stated that the service was attended only by members of the family. However, the Otsego Union of May 22, 1919, describes his funeral service in these words: 6 ministers were in attendance at the funeral, which was held at the Baptist Church. 5 were present from Grand Rapids, where he labored successfully for many years. Dudley M. Canright was buried in the Mountain Home Cemetery at Otsego, by the side of his second wife, Lucy. The grave is marked with a fairly modern stone. It reads, Elder D. M. Canright. September 22, 1840, May 12, 1919. An author of world renown. Lucy H., his wife. Dec 22, 1855, January 2, 1913. A mother to us all. The title elder has, for many years, been baffling to Baptists and Adventists alike. Canright died a Baptist. The term elder is an Adventist title, not the title employed by the Baptists when referring to their ministers. It may be observed that the nearby graves of his children who died shortly after he left the Adventist ministry carry markers indicating that they were the children of Reverend D.M. Canright. The last phrase, a mother to us all, is strongly reminiscent of the one Canright employed in his wife's obituary, which he dictated to me in May 1913, some 5 months after her death. See pages 130, 131. I heard him employ these words on several occasions, as I took up work with him immediately after Lucy's death. The adulation and offer of world renown sounds strangely like a Canright composition. Some have wondered, could it be that he himself chose the wording for the stone to mark his resting place? And if so, was it feeling closer to the Adventists than to the Baptists who? Page 168. Selected the Adventist title elder rather than the Baptist title reverend. This is what, in 1968, I found to be the case. After many attempts that failed to yield the information, I found the widow of the undertaker who had taken care of Mr. Canright's funeral. She was an attendant at the funeral home at the time of his death, and clearly remembered the details. She related that Mr. Canright had, not long before his death, made appropriate arrangements with her husband. A sealed envelope with instructions concerning the tombstone, with the wording, was provided by Mr. Canright. This letter was left unopened till funds from the estate made possible its erection. As pointed out, other obligations of first priority waited many, many years. The stone was erected in 1939, hence its modern appearance. Be this as it may, Mr. Canright was buried with little immediate notice, and his grave stood unmarked for 20 years. I discovered that the Baptist church nearby, which he had pastored, knew nothing of his resting place. Nor was it known, even to his nephew, who lived in Otsego, not 2 miles from the cemetery. As already observed, a note on the back page of the Review and Herald carried to Seventh-day Adventists the knowledge of his death. A belated death and funeral notice also appeared on June 1, 1919, in the Grand Rapids Herald. Reference is made to his life and his work, to the esteem of his fellow church members, and to a horrible fall downstairs. The readers are assured that he died in the faith in which he had lived and labored. Canright left a will drawn up April 3, 1916, soon after his accident. His children were remembered, and certain residue of the estate and accruing incomes from royalties of his books were willed to the Berean Baptist Church. The estate, however, as I have pointed out, was not settled until some 20 years after his death. Court records indicate that there was a scarcity of means. The inventories list a few personal items totaling in value only $75. Scaled-down hospital bills remained unpaid, and the Battle Creek Sanitarium did not receive its money until 9 years after treating Mr. Canright. Page 169. This is difficult to understand if we may credit the statements he published of his affluence and of the income reported from the sale of lots. Back taxes on his property, the allotment of $12.50 a week to his daughter Genevieve, which was remuneration for his care, besides 2 or 3 notes that were outstanding added together with the scaled M-down hospital bill, almost consumed the returns from the disposition of the real estate made by the court. There was left some $3,000, which was divided among the heirs. The records of the court bear mute and embarrassing witness. Thus at the age of 78 the life of B. M. Canright came to a close. We do not wish to seem unkind to a man who suffered much in his last years and died almost in obscurity, a man who spent the last half of his life attempting to tear down that which during the first half of his life he had built up. We feel, however, that it is not out of place to observe that Ellen G. White, whom he once accepted as a prophet of God, but whom he later bitterly opposed as a false prophet, had predicted in a letter of warning to him, "You have wanted to be too much, and make a show and noise in the world, and as the result your son will surely set in obscurity." Every available record indicates that in spite of his earnest effort to prevent its fulfillment, the tragic prediction came true. These chapters have been written with no animosity or ill will. They portray the sad story of a man who seemingly had sold his soul, a man who by his own testimony could not say what he wanted to say, and a man who longed to return to his former ways and fellowship, but who realized that he had gone beyond the point of no return. The story is sustained by many witnesses and contemporary evidence. Yet, being a proud man, he did all he could to preserve the image of a happy, satisfied Baptist minister. The thoughtful reader may judge for himself whether the circle in which he chose to cast his lot during the latter part of life ever really accepted him. Personally, I am convinced that the careful reader will be cautious about accepting the testimony of such a witness. In notes. 1. As to the exclusive ownership, Canright was mistaken, and within recent decades all have been republished in facsimile form so all who wish copies may have them. 2. Some correspondence with Elder Canright concerning his late book, The Lord's Day, with some criticisms, 1916.
So Ellen White once again proves that she is a true prophet. And it's a pathetically sad story, the ending of the life of D.M. Canright, and how he really wanted to come back to the Adventist truth, but had gone so far in his going against his own conscience that he either realized he couldn't come back, he had committed the unpardonable sin, or he at least was so depressed that he thought he had committed the unpardonable sin. Either way, that's not good news. Anyway, this gives you a little bit more light on D.M. Canright and how, I say this with all kindness, he was not much of a man to be listened to when it was concerning his trashing of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because he was dishonest to himself. He outwardly trashed the Adventist Church, but inwardly he wanted to come home. This is a very sad, pathetic end to, a life that could have been so much more.